previous video I spoke about different types of sketchbook that you might want to choose, and if you want to make your own, the best one to start with is a Concertina Sketchbook. It's really very simple to construct, and here's one that I made, a small one, and you can see it is exactly what it says. It's like a concertina, it opens and closes like that. So you can use both sides of the paper on it as well. You can kind of open it up like a book, traditional kind of book, or you can open it up in full length like that, and you can continue over the pages. I've done separate pages here with different leaves, but you can carry illustrations across the pages as well, for as many pages as you like, in fact. So it's quite versatile, it's easy to make, and so that's the one I would recommend starting with. It's got a hard cover front and back, and I made this one from 2 strips of paper from an imperial sheet. So that would be about half of an imperial sheet that's been used for this book. So it's really inexpensive to make. The cover is cardboard covered with a craft paper. So I use a hard cardboard, and you could just use paper that you have maybe from the back of a sketch, from a watercolour block or something. You could use that as an alternative, but I've got some card here that I can cut down to size, whatever size I decide to make the sketchbook. I could use a larger card if needed. The larger the card, the heavier it needs to be, really. The paper that I'm using is Arches, and I'm going to use this roll. As I've said, it's £140 in weight, or 300 grams per square metre. It's hot press satin is the type of paper. So that's a smooth surface, ideal for the watercolours, for typical of a botanical artist. It gives that smooth, crisp finish. And then I'll need some paper to cover the outer card. And I was inspired by Scoffin's Outlines of Botany, which is a fabulous old book. It actually has these, show you these as well, beautiful kind of illustrated chapter heading letters, which is really rather nice, and things like that can inspire you with ideas for your sketchbook. You know, lots of old books have nice ideas. So I like that marble paper, so I looked for some marble papers and found these online, and they're a matte paper, so they're really a nice finish, and there's various different designs that you can use. And I sometimes use these on the inside covers of my stitch sketchbooks as well. These ones here, I'll use a whole sheet to cover and hold it together. See how that old book's falling apart? You can glue a sheet there, but that's a different type of sketchbook. So I've got those marble papers, or you can choose any paper that you like. I've also got the William Morris ones. There's one like the one that I used for this little book. And that's also the same company, and that's got a variety of different William Morris designs. These are matte papers. This book also has glossy papers. Now the glossy papers are not quite so nice as the matte ones, so I would choose the matte ones given a choice. You can cover them with some protective like vinyl as well if you want to, but use a matte. Don't think use a shiny, it looks a lot better. Shiny ones are a little bit more difficult to stick down, and they tend to wear more on the edges as well. Okay, so that's all the things that go into the book to construct it. So let's look at what we need to put it together. So we need first to cut the card for the outer size. Decide what size you want your book as well. I'm going to be making 6 books for a class that I'm doing the week after next, and so it's quite a big job to make 6 of them, but start with 1 and see how you get on. Keep it small to start with. So this one is 14 centimeters by 10 centimeters, and you can make it that size. You could make it square, or you could make it a little bit larger than that, you know, kind of this size. This is be around about the standard size I'd use for a sketchbook, so it's entirely up to you what you do. So cutting mat, metal ruler for cutting the card, craft knife. I've got a Stanley knife. It's better to use a heavy duty knife if you're cutting card. I've got a bone folder, and they're used for scoring the card and bending it on the bends. We're going to tear the paper itself. It might prove difficult because this roll of paper is very large. If you feel a little bit daunted and you don't have a roll of paper, because a roll of paper is quite a big investment, just use an imperial sheet or even a block, and you can fix them together like I did this one using a piece of like washi tape or some type of tape there just to hold them, and it's really not an unattractive thing to have a join in it like that. There's various ways you can join it, and you only see it on one side anyway. Pencil just for marking things out, scissors for trimming the paper at the corners when you're covering it, and some pH neutral adhesive, which is useful for gluing things and it doesn't get acid into anything. So it's a PVA conservation type glue. Don't use cheap nasty glues because they're not good to use or to have in contact with any of the materials that you use. So that's basically all that you need to construct this simple sketchbook. So next I'm going to show you how to put it together. So the first stage is to just make marks along the paper 15 centimetres from the edge in order to be able to make a fold at that point. So now I can put the ruler along the marks that I've made and take the bone folder or any other tool that can make a scoring indentation into the paper and run it along the edge of the ruler. So once you've scored along the edge of the paper there, it's easy to fold it over. Now this is the most tricky fold. The first fold is the most difficult because you have to find where you've scored it. But once you've done the first fold, it's easier to do more. And what you need to do from there on is to fold it back and forth. And the purpose of that is to break down the fibres in the paper. And the best way of making that fold sharp at the edge is to use that bone folder and just run it along the edge of the paper. Every time you fold it back and forth like this, just run the bone folder along the edge. And I fold it back and forth 6 to 8 times, and it breaks down the fibres of the paper along that edge, so it's going to make it easier to tear it along. When I've folded it enough, I'll use a wet cloth with clean water just to dampen it along the tear line. You can do that on both sides, so bend it back again and then you're ready to tear it. So put one hand flat on the side that's not being torn and gently pull it, and you can tell if it's tearing correctly. It'll easily tear, and just work your way down the paper, separating it gradually, and it'll come away cleanly, and then that'll leave you with a long strip that you can use to make your sketchbook. And so there is that long strip. It's torn away from the rest of the paper, and now we can fold that, and we fold it in half first, and we work with the length of the paper, just folding each part in half. So fold it in half again in each half, and so on. You can use that bone folder to just put the creases in at the edges as well. So now bend each half in half again. So that bends into the middle, and again crease the edge as before. Side there, so meeting in the middle. So we're just using the width of the paper there, and then we're going to bend each of those sections in half again, so every piece is the same size. And then finally, we need to bend them back and forth in a concertina shape. So that we just use the lines that we've bent, but bend them in the right orientation to go back and forth in a concertina. And that will give us the correct orientation to enable us to glue the paper to the end card pieces that we're going to use for the cover. And there you can see we have that concertina shape. So we're at the final stage of making this little concertina sketchbook. So I've pressed the paper overnight, and I need to make sure that I glue it with the correct side. So that I have this as the right side of the paper and the other side as the reverse side. But as I said, you can work on both sides, so that's not a problem. The rear side has like a mesh on it. You can see, if you look at it with a magnifying glass, you can see a fine kind of mesh because it's pressed on a wire mesh. And the other side is called the felt side because it is against a felt roller when it's made. So one side is smoother than the other, and you'll see the back has these little tiny mesh marks like a wire mesh. So I've got that ready. So the first thing is to cut 2 pieces of card, just a few millimeters all around, larger than the actual paper size. So you can see it's not much bigger, but it has to be a tiny bit bigger by a few millimeters. You can have it larger than that if you want, but there's really not a lot of point in having it any larger than that. And also cut some of the decorative paper, which I have already done there. Just a centimetre to 1.5 centimetres larger than the actual card. And then I've bent the edges around the card so we know where it's going to fit on it, and just cut the corners at a diagonal. Just got one more to do there. Just across that corner there. And then we're ready to glue it down. So you can see I've already done this one and glued it and stuck it and then pressed it so that it dries smooth on one side. But these matte papers are pretty good. The glossy ones tend to raise a bit and bubble if you're not careful. So I glue the card using that PVA that I showed you at the start, the pH neutral PVA. Try not to get it on my mat because otherwise it'll get stuck on the paper side, the decorative paper, and we don't want that. That'll be a mess. So just giving that a coat of the PVA, not too much. And sometimes I just put a tiny little bit of water in it so it's got a little bit more flow in it, but just really a tiny little bit. Be sure to get in the corners. And then take our paper, and we've already got that line from the bend in there, so we know roughly where to position it. Pop that onto the paper and press it down. You can see that's gone down quite well straight away. Just give it a good press all over. And then we've got these edges already bent over, so just glue the edge of the paper this time. And I'll do one side. Try not to get too much glue on there, because if you get too much it'll splodge out, but it doesn't matter because you're going to cover that with paper. But it's just about having the right amount of glue really, not too much, not too little. So do one side and then the opposite side. Press that down. And then the other two edges. You can just bend, you sometimes get a little bit sticking out at the corner, you can just sort of fold that in. And the final one. So that edge that folds over just needs to be good, wide enough to go underneath the watercolour paper. Okay, so that's the two sides done. Best if you press it for a little bit just to make sure it doesn't bubble up. So we've got the front and the back done there now, and all we need to do now is to glue the paper at the front and the back. So obviously it needs to open in the right way, but it's totally reversible as well. You can open it from the other side, and those two sides will be glued to the card. So again, you can glue the paper or the board, but obviously if you glue the board, you might go over the edge slightly. So I'm going to glue the paper. Being careful not to get it on any other pages. It doesn't matter really, you can do the paper or the board, it's of no consequence, it's just whatever's easiest. And if you do add that little bit of water, it just gives you a bit more flow and sinks into the paper a bit more. Okay, so now we have to add our card to the front. Make sure I haven't got dirty hands. Yeah, I think that's okay. Just press that down, like so. Press it down, and then we're going to do the one on the back. Just make sure we've got it in the right way round, in the right position. So the sketchbook is about 15 centimetres. I use the width of the roll of paper to determine the folds in it, so folding it just in half and half again. So it's about 15 centimetres square. I want to make sure that's in the right place. Just going to pop that on the back to line it up with the front one. You get any on the cover like I just did, just wipe it off and open it upside, just reposition it slightly. Like so, and that's, just press that down, and that's the finished sketchbook. And what I would do now is press it so that it dries flat, and that's finished.